There's something poetic about me leaving Asia for the first time to live alone in England right as I turned 20. Sort of like my own rite of passage to adulthood. I experienced so many firsts and gained so many skills in these few months here that I honestly have no idea how I'm going to be able to condense them into a short video. But since this is a school exchange, let's start off with the actual education. The list of modules offered to exchange students were quite limited, with the only 2D animation module being experimental animation. I honestly thought that we would just be animating digitally like in TV Paint, like I had always done, so I was totally unprepared for the onslaught of traditional art in this module, with the only digital thing being the camera.
Blind drawing.
We had an hour of class every Thursday where we would just spend the entire hour studying and drawing animal skeletons and taxidermies displayed in the studio. Then on Fridays, we had 2 hours of class where we would just work in groups to produce short animation tests of animals with different mediums like charcoal and sand. Once we got further into the semester, we started working on our final projects individually during the 2 hours. Almost all of my previous animation assignments in LaSalle had required bipedal characters, so it was actually challenging for me to get used to drawing and animating the animals. But luckily, I had managed to get really constructive feedback from our lecturer, Jackie.
Just like, what's experimental animation all about?
Are you recording?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I am.
Experimental animation is about using a variety of media in order to make things move. How does that media affect the character design, the environment, and the movement? So it's all about exploration. Different materials, different media.
Yeah. And like, are you looking for finished products here?
No.
No.
It is because the module is experimental animation, it is about the experimenting in order to make discoveries. So I don't expect students to have a finished piece.
Yeah.
If they have maybe 6 little tests with the animation, that's better than one finished product. Because it encourages them to explore before they make final decisions about the look of their animation.
Like what Jackie said, since the whole point was experimenting, I decided to include a multitude of mediums into my final animation, choosing the nursery rhyme, the lion, and the unicorn. Now, I had never animated a fight sequence before, much less a fight sequence between 2 animals. So I studied the battle between Bambi and Rano in Disney's Bambi. I made notes of the shot compositions, the camera angles, and the way they cut the scene to show off the fight choreography. I noticed they actually used POV shots in the most intense parts of the fight, which I found really cool. While drafting my own storyboard, I had to consider the limitations of the traditional mediums I was using. I knew from the test that sand animation was actually the most limited, with the elusive nature of the sand making it hard to maintain any consistency whatsoever. However, the use of negative spaces was very prominent when it came to drawing with sand, and I wanted to make use of that unique feature, which is why I used sand animation when it came to the more magical parts of the story. Unlike sand, paper-cut animation would allow me to include a lot of details to my character and background designs. However, with flat 2D puppets, I would only be able to show off the sides of my animals. Thus, I assigned all of my wide shots to be done with paper-cut animation, where the background could be fully shown off and the lack of character angles would not be a problem. The puppets from the paper-cut animation could then be taken and shot in front of live backgrounds, turning it into virtual reality. But I kept those for scenes with simple animation, as I knew that it would be much harder than animating on a flat surface. Now with charcoal, I would be able to animate close-ups of the animals and showcase more dynamic angles. However, as I would be drawing all the frames on the same piece of paper, I had to consider the change in shades and tones as I wiped away each frame to draw the next. The energetic expression of the medium is why I used charcoal for the most intense scenes of the fight. When it came to the actual production of the animation, my sand and charcoal portions were completed smoothly enough. I was not as used to the mediums as I thought I was, and I had to learn how to navigate them as I was filming. I learned that it was best to leave the previous frame intact as I drew the next frame, since I did not have onion skin like in digital animation. There were a few shots where I had carelessly erased the frame before starting the next one, causing the animation to look jerky and abrupt because I was completely lost. But once I learned from my mistake, I actually ended up really liking the end product. The big portion of my problems actually came from my paper cut animation, more specifically my lack of proper equipment for it. If I had known I would be doing stop motion animation here, I would have brought along my Flex-Arm tripod I had at home. Unfortunately, I didn't, so I had to improvise. I actually had to use an iron and a lot of tape to hold down my mini tripod to keep it from falling off the edge of my desk onto my backgrounds on the floor. The unbalanced position of the tripod made the camera angle of my phone a little skewed, so I actually had to make sure my background was measured according to the angle of my phone by using a measuring tape and looking at the camera as I drew out the lines. I had to make the incredibly painful decision of leaving my phone in the tripod without touching it to maintain consistency for the entire period of filming. This lack of proper equipment also made it hard for me to bring to fruition some of the shots from my animatic, such as scenes where there is camera movement or close-ups. When it came time for me to finally get out of my room to film against the live backgrounds, I got up at sunrise just to make use of all hours of the sun and went scavenging across Portsmouth for the best locations. With no longer a flat background to position my puppet, I realized I would accidentally turn the stick or move it back and forth when I didn't intend to, so I had to take proper care to maintain consistency. With just a few hiccups along the way, I finally managed to complete my animation for this module. While not technically a formal module, I attended the optional live drawing classes every Wednesday from 2 to 5 p.m. as well. It was an open class where students from any course could attend. You just had to sign up before the slots ran out. The model would stand in the middle and we would surround them with our easels or sketchbooks, and every session would include a series of 10-minute poses, 15-minute poses, and several sets of sequential poses. I always found sequential poses to be the most daunting as we had so little time per pose, but I found it so fun here, especially when the model would give the series of poses a little story. So this one is of a man searching for water in a desert, only to find out it's a mirage. And here is the other angle. And this one is of a royal servant posing nude for the entertainment of other servants, only to be discovered by his boss and then has to beg for forgiveness. Isn't that fun? We always had a session in the middle of class where we would lay out everybody's drawings and just look at all the different styles and interpretations of the model. I love this class so much that I made sure to sign up the moment the slots were open every single week. As for my essay module, World and Transnational Cinema, I honestly thought it was just a repeat of what I learned back in LASALLE Diploma's contextual studies with topics like French New Wave and Italian Neorealism. Come to my pleasant surprise, this class actually covered the topics of colonialism and migration in films from Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East, which were completely new to me. We had film screenings on Mondays and then lectures on Thursdays, but they would sometimes get swapped around whenever the strikes caused the Thursday lectures to be cancelled, which was kind of a culture shock to me as I would sometimes find myself walking into an empty classroom. I was already interested in the topics of colonialism and migration as an immigrant from Myanmar in Singapore, both countries being former British colonies. I was excited to be able to learn about it formally in the context of films as well, learning the different perspectives of this shared topic from countries all over the world. which, by the way, I did end up doing pretty well. I got a 74 out of 100 for this assignment, and also, like, they said in the feedback that my report was well presented and that I effectively made the argument. And the only negative comments were about my citations, which I missed out a few, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. Last of all, I had playwriting and text for performance. This module didn't really meet any of the criteria required for a submission, so it was almost like an elective for me. I had always been really passionate about stories, so although script writing for film wasn't available this semester, I thought this could be a really nice alternative to work on my storytelling. The lecturer kit was really open to anything when it came to our scripts, so I was able to let my creative juices flow for this one. And since writing a script took so much less time than actually making a film, I got to explore scenes and concepts that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So I also got back my result for my first playwriting assessment, which was 2 character descriptions, a 3-page play script between the 2 characters, and then a list of 5 plays that I plan to study. And I got a 70 out of 100, which is also an A, and the feedback was generally very positive, things like terrific and funny, fresh and reads well, excellent flow, nice sense of storytelling, compelling work. Maybe the only problem was that I wrote too much for some of the dialogues, but even the playlist, he said it was an excellent mix of classical and new, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. That was all my classes wrapped up, but thankfully, I did a lot more than just attend school while I was here. Due to my severe dependence on my parents before I left, I made the conscious effort to talk to as many people as I could my first few weeks here to create a support network around me ASAP, and it made the whole experience so much more enriching. I made friends in the table tennis club who let me sit in on their sessions for me to do some observational drawing. I became a member of the Historical Reenactment Society, where they had combat sessions with shields, spears, axes, and swords, and I learned to sew for the very first time, even managing to make a tunic. The society also led me to different places around the UK, traveling to York with Anais for the Jorvik Viking Festival, and driving all the way to Coventry to explore the historical crafts and clothes in Torm, the original reenactors market, and Arm, the artisans and reenactors market. I met my online friend in Wales for the first time, and we sang into a well together. I tracked through mud and water in Winchester with my new friends in Portsmouth. I impulsively decided to travel to Isle of Wight with 4 strangers, only to get trapped in an ancient lighthouse by the brutal wind atop a hill. It's only been a few short months, yet I feel like a completely new person. There's been so many priceless experiences that I wouldn't trade for the world, and I'm so glad to have been given this amazing opportunity to go on this exchange. Never forget, you only live once.